The creek behind our lots was a quiet, working line, a narrow watercourse folded into a drainage easement and a forgotten paragraph of the plat. It carried rain from roofs and streets to the retention pond and asked for nothing but a clear path. Karen, armed with bylaws and a curated aesthetic, branded it a nuisance and a liability. A white pickup arrived without a posted permit. A concrete skim spread across the narrowest span behind my fence, finished with a neat lip and a ribbon of mortared stone that looked like a spa ad for water that had never been asked what it wanted. The channel narrowed, the surface smoothed. Silt started to settle in a place that used to whisk it away. From her patio on the bend, the view looked obedient. From the bank, the creek looked muzzled. The forecast stacked humid thunderstorms in a row, as if nature were clearing its throat. The first rain slid over the gray skim like a sigh and hesitated at the lip. A shadow of wetness lingered longer than usual across the downstream bank. By the second storm, grit collected in a sleepy band and nudged the flow toward the soft side under Karen's manicured lawn. The HOA Facebook feed filled with staged photos and half-hearted applause for the tidy look. A violation notice landed in my mailbox, scolding the untamed bank on my side, while the bend at her yard darkened into a shallow saucer. Frogs returned in commas along the grass line, and her designer pavers wore a rim of damp that never quite dried. I pulled plat maps and county code from my file. The parts about natural watercourses that should never be impeded. Radar lit up in red, and the retention pond out front rose to kiss its ring of reeds. The air smelled metallic and impatient. The main storm arrived with thick drops that stitched the air into sheets. Upstream, culverts exhaled weeks of dust in a single rush. The flow should have raced, but the concrete skim demanded manners, shaved speed and stacked water. It climbed the lip, then pressed sideways, testing the seam where mortar met soil. The outside bank at the bend, always the softest, gave first. A bright slice opened and aimed itself at the lowest point in Karen's lawn. Her French drains gurgled and then gagged. The patio became a channel, the pavers a reluctant spillway. Planters bobbed, the cedar bench tilted, and the garage threshold transformed into a line that meant nothing to water with momentum. The sump pump chattered until it lost the argument. Behind my fence, the creek clawed at the concrete edge, tearing at the place where smooth met memory. Everything with a camera caught the climb, and the sound turned to a steady, hungry roar. Morning brought the flat gray light of an exhausted sky and the smell of mud that had touched drywall. Karen's showpiece yard had become a shallow lagoon. The turf peeled in scallops, the river rock path redistributed by a critic with no patience. Inside, baseboards lifted and hardwoods arched into miniature hills. The high-end staging of $1 million listing now had a watermark. The insurance adjuster's visit was brief and clinical. The claim language sorted damage into categories that did not end well for unauthorized alterations. A county inspector walked the bank with a rod and a camera, recorded the skim, the lip, the constriction, and the new cut, then issued citations that read like a verdict. The order was simple and brutal. Remove the obstruction, restore the natural watercourse, and pay the fines that accumulate while pretending not to hear. The board called an emergency session. The neighborhood listened through doors and screens. Restoration meant jackhammers at dawn, excavators biting out the skim in chalky slabs, and turbidity curtains floating like bandages downstream. The contractor brought in coir logs, willow stakes, and a design that spoke the old language of bends, riffles, and pools. Rock veins nudged the flow back to center. The banks were regraded with native plugs that promised roots rather than optics. Every hour of work was more expensive than the pour that caused it, and every invoice hit an HOA reserve that did not bend far. A special assessment letter followed, heavy with urgency and math that punished the innocent.
Screenshots flew.
A recall petition metastasized. Karen resigned in a post without comments. A new board seated engineers before aesthetics and made permits the first step. Not the last. The season shifted. The first test rain arrived soft and honest. The creek curled through the repaired bend and exhaled like a chest unstrapped. The sale sign on Karen's lawn arrived with an asterisk disguised as a disclosure. The price slid in steps, and buyers toured with a practiced glance at the new riparian buffer and the quiet hum of a sump that now had meaning. When the contract finally inked, the number was smaller than her ambition. The neighborhood settled into a calmer rhythm. The bylaws grew a spine about water, stamped by hydrology reports instead of opinions. The restored channel stitched itself back into the land, carrying leaves and stormlight without complaint. On the next big rain, the creek rose and rushed where it should. Shoulder to bank, riffle to pool, and the retention pond took its share without drama. From my back steps, coffee in hand, the sound was a clean thread through the noise of a subdivision that loved straight edges. Nature did not gloat. It simply remembered, and it kept moving.